to enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. When discussing marriage prospects, my mother pushed 2 betrothal cards in front of my sister and me. One belonged to the impoverished scholar, Edward Zhao. His household was completely empty, yet my sister's eyes lit up as if she had found a rare treasure. I chose the other one. It was the card of Arthur Liu, the 4th rank prefect of Shunqin Prefecture, a highly favored official before the emperor. His only flaw was that before the primary wife had even crossed the threshold, a concubine had already borne him his eldest son, who had just turned 3 this year. I reached out. The tip of my finger landed on Arthur's betrothal card. My sister, Celia Kiao, turned her head, her voice full of contempt. "My dear sister, you truly are a gold digger, entirely beyond saving." I smiled without replying. A gold digger. In my past life, I was incredibly noble. I got strung along by a small startup making empty promises, working myself to the bone. The result? I worked overtime until 300 a.m. and dropped dead right at my desk. After transmigrating to become the daughter of a poor but honorable scholarly family, I had an epiphany. Getting married is exactly like jumping ship to a new employer. You absolutely must choose a boss who has both money and power. The red candles burned brightly on our wedding night. I wore the heavy phoenix crown, silently calculating the investment ratio and the expected return on this matrimonial business deal. My investment: the status of a primary wife, my household management skills, and a few thin political connections from my maiden family. The expected return: the dignity of the lady of the house, a lifelong meal ticket, and the potential future title of an imperial lady. And most importantly, a life where I could lie flat and enjoy myself, no longer needing to work like a horse or toil like an ox. When Arthur lifted the bridal veil, I raised my eyes to evaluate this new business partner. He was about 27 or 28 years old, with sharp eyebrows and deep eyes. Wearing a red robe and a jade belt, his tall, jade-like figure truly possessed a face capable of making young women swoon, coupled with an extraordinary aura forged by authority. It was just a pity that those eyes were too cold, like a frozen abyss. The nuptial wine had just been poured to the brim. Before it could even be handed to us, rushed footsteps echoed outside the door. "My lord, the young master suddenly has a high fever and won't stop crying. Concubine Lydia begs you to come over and take a look at once." The voice called out, both urgent and panicked, though the acting was slightly overdone. Arthur's movements halted. I held up my cup of wine, waiting to see how this seasoned senior executive would handle a sudden incident. He set his wine cup down, stood up, and turned straight toward the door. His actions swift and decisive. The elderly maid guarding the door was so horrified her voice cracked. "My lord, tonight is your wedding night. This is completely against the rules." Arthur didn't stop his stride, only tossing back a single sentence: "Human life is at stake. Madame Kiao is a reasonable person. She will naturally understand." The door opened and then closed again. The red candle popped with a crackle. Brilliant. On the very first day on the job, the boss had immediately established a show of dominance. In my past life, when the project manager stole my credit, he had that exact same "You are reasonable, so just endure it" look on his face. I tilted my head back and drained the cup of wine, squinting at the burn. As a trusted minister of the emperor who had climbed to this position, how could he possibly not know the weight and importance of his wedding night? This was not an oversight, this was a direct knock on the head. It was a warning to remind me exactly who held the real control in this inner courtyard. Back when Arthur came to propose, my father despised the fact that he already had a concubine-born son, so he laid out a series of harsh conditions, accompanied by political exchanges of interest. Arthur accepted them all, but in his heart, he surely made a note: the Kiao family is insatiably greedy. So the daughter of the Chiao family must also be someone who would take a mile if given an inch. Therefore, this wedding night drama was exactly the power play he had prepared for me. Concubine Lydia and Arthur's son were settled in the west courtyard, less than 30 steps away from my main chamber. My maid, Chloe, was flushed red with anger. "My lady," concubine Lydia's side just sent word saying, "The young master is very ill, the lord probably won't be coming over tonight." I was facing the mirror, taking off my heavy jewelry. Hearing this, I raised an eyebrow. "Have they called for a doctor?" "They have, but the doctor is still on the way," she replied. "Oh," I replied simply, tossing the last gold hairpin into the jewelry box. "Then let's go to sleep early." Chloe's eyes widened. "Lady, are you not angry?" I lay down on the soft bedding. Getting angry only provides energy to the opponent. But concubine Lydia is clearly doing this on purpose, she stammered. I can see that? I said, closing my eyes. It was a low-level manipulative green tea tactic, using a child to manufacture a crisis, stealing the leadership's attention, while simultaneously suppressing the newcomer. In my past life, I've seen far too much of this. Early the next morning, following the strict rules, I went to pay my respects to the mother-in-law, Dowager Chu. She accepted the tea and glanced at me. I heard about what happened last night. Arthur was out of line too, worrying far too much about that side. I lowered my eyes. A child falling ill is a major matter. It is only natural for the Lord to be anxious. Dowager Chu was somewhat surprised. She observed me a few times, her tone softening slightly. You are an understanding child. Understanding? No, I was merely calculating the sunk costs. What would I gain by making a scene? A tiny bit of sympathy, a few fair words, and then what? Completely tearing my face with Arthur, turning this cooperative marriage into a hostile conflict. It wasn't worth it. As for the power play Arthur threw at me. Rule number 1 for a corporate veteran: never treat the boss's temper as just a temper. It's simply a management tactic. As long as the salary is paid in full, I will treat it as corporate culture and accept it. But accepting it doesn't mean lying flat to be trampled on. I dressed myself impeccably. Not bright red, but a deep crimson purple, looking steady and composed without losing the commanding presence of the lady of the house. Leaning on Chloe's arm, I left Dowager Chu's room and stepped outside. Turning right, walking along the covered corridor for about 10 steps, I found the door to the west courtyard room wasn't completely shut. Lamplight spilled out, along with a voice that twisted and turned like a mountain road. My lord, your concubine did not mean to put you in a difficult position. It is just that little Harry suddenly ran a fever, and my heart was in an absolute panic. Madame Kiao has only just crossed the threshold. If she knows you care so much for our mother and son, will she think I lack understanding? Will she be unable to tolerate us in the future? Standing outside the door, I almost clapped. What a textbook green tea monologue. The emotion was full, the rhythm was precise, leaving absolutely no room to be called out. I pushed the door open and walked in, just in time to see Lydia leaning weakly, boneless, against Arthur's chest. His hand rested on her shoulder, softly comforting her. Rest assured, I am here. The warm scene looked just like a promotional poster for a family drama. I coughed loudly, and the two immediately separated. Lydia's eyes were red as she timidly hid behind Arthur. He looked up at me, the slight warmth on his face freezing into shards of ice in an instant. Madame Kiao has just crossed the threshold, and you are already so impatient to exercise your authority as the primary wife, he demanded. I rolled my eyes. I couldn't hold back. I truly couldn't hold it back. Lord Lu. I found a chair, sat down, and poured myself a cup of cold tea. There are no outsiders here, so let us open the skylight and speak frankly. Arthur frowned slightly, evidently having never met a primary wife who didn't follow the standard script like this. I took a sip of tea. The Chiao family and the Lu family both come from humble beginnings, with no deep roots in the political arena. This marriage alliance means we prosper together, or we fall together. You thought you had the Kiao family's weakness in your grasp, which is why you came to propose, correct? His eyes flickered. My father did indeed value your future prospects, but he was uncomfortable with the fact that you produced an eldest son before even marrying. That is why he demanded double the bride price and those political favors. I spread my hands. Originally, it was to force you to back down. Who knew you would accept it all? I set the teacup down, smiling with absolute sincerity. I have a straightforward personality. This marriage of ours, to put it bluntly, is a partnership. You provide the resources, the dignity of the lady of the house, the authority to manage the inner courtyard, and the future potential of an imperial title. I provide the capability, the household management, the social networking, the birth of a legitimate son, and the major political connections of the Chiao family. Arthur stared at me in silence, as if evaluating the fuss I made last night. Out of respect for the sincerity Lord Lu showed during the proposal, I endured the humiliation of my wedding night. This marriage alone has lifted me from absolute poverty to a wealthy lady with assets. So, no matter how big the issue is, to me, it isn't an issue at all. I looked at him, my voice calm but hiding a storm. But I do not expect there to be a next time. Lydia spoke up weakly from the side. Madam, your concubine does not understand what you mean. I shot her a glance. Concubine Lydia does not need to understand. You only need to remember one thing. Do not add any unexpected burdens to my plate. I turned back to Arthur. My sincerity is laid out right here. As long as Lydia and the eldest son know their place and behave, I will be a perfectly standard primary wife. The dignity you should afford me must not be lacking, but the prerequisite is, I emphasized every single word, do not touch my core interests. Finally, Arthur opened his mouth, his tone betraying no emotion. And what exactly are your core interests? The authority of the primary wife, the peace of the inner courtyard. And also, I pointed at myself, my comfortable days. Whoever makes me uncomfortable, I will make sure they cannot live in peace. Lydia dropped to her knees with a thud, tears falling on command. Madam, please observe clearly. Your concubine would never dare. Last night, Harry's illness was truly too sudden. I panicked and disturbed the Lord. I absolutely had no intention of causing Madam any trouble. Here she goes brewing green tea again. I let out a heavy sigh. Concubine Lydia, this routine of yours, in the eyes of someone who understands, simply cannot stand. She choked on her words. I looked over at Arthur. Lord Lu, we are both reasonable people. Only with a peaceful inner courtyard can you focus on your ambitions at court. I can play the role of the virtuous primary wife, but if your concubine continues to create internal friction in the management of the household. I paused and smiled. I wouldn't mind exercising the authority of the primary wife, for example, sending her to a rural estate to recover her health, or finding a Buddhist temple for her to cultivate her character. Lydia's face instantly went deathly pale. Arthur fell silent for a long time, then suddenly let out a very faint laugh. Very well. He stood up. Then let us consider our partnership officially started. He nodded. As long as Madam treats Lydia and Harry decently, the dignity you are owed, I will naturally provide to your satisfaction. I dipped into a slight curtsy. Then I shall take my leave and await the arrival of your investment capital. Workplace rule number 1: accept the imperfections of your position and focus purely on your core interests. Returning to the main chamber, Chloe was so excited her face was bright red. My lady, you are amazing. With just a few words, you seized the initiative. I collapsed backward onto the chaise lounge and kicked off my shoes. No, I was merely helping Lord Lu calculate the accounts clearly. What accounts? The value of a stable inner courtyard, I said calmly. He is a smart man. He knows when to maintain sentiment and when to maintain interests. So will concubine Lydia behave from now on? I laughed. The reason a green tea acts like a green tea is because she forever believes her own cup of tea is unique in the world. Not long after, Arthur walked in, followed closely by Lydia. He looked at me and said, "You are the lady of the house. According to the rules, a concubine must serve tea to the primary wife." Lydia had already knelt down, holding the teacup high with both hands, her attitude respectful. It seemed Arthur had already given her a strict talking to. Whether it was serving the tea or replying, there were no more green tea undertones. I drank the tea and rewarded her with a golden hairpin. I gave a few words of instruction, considering the formality officially complete. As for the concubine, born son, he was still sick and couldn't come, so I waved his greeting. After Lydia left, Arthur ordered someone to bring forward a brocade box. Inside were the household management tokens and the keys to the accounting room. He placed the box on the table. There are also the deeds to the shops and the rural estates. The startup capital you wanted, he said. I opened it to take a look. Glittering gold. I was highly satisfied. Lord Lu keeps his word. I closed the box. Arthur didn't leave. Instead, he sat down. Madam. Yes. You just said, our marriage is a partnership. He looked at me, his eyes profound. What is the ultimate goal? I thought for a moment. Your political career flourishes, and I gain prestige through my husband. You have no worries in the inner courtyard, and I live my days in peace. What else? What else is there? He leaned in closer, the candlelight casting intersecting light and shadows across his face. For example, a legitimate son. I blinked. Oh, the KPIs have arrived. I sat up straight and put on my professional smile. I believe that currently, we have only achieved preliminary cooperation. I pointed toward the west courtyard outside the window. There is no rush for a legitimate son. After all, Lord Lu already has an eldest son, so the Lu family's lineage is secured. Once Lord Lu's inner courtyard is truly stable, I will naturally consider pushing for deeper cooperation. I looked at him with a radiant smile. Why the need to rush things? He looked at me quietly, his eyes as deep as a deep pool. After a long time, he chuckled softly. Every word from Madam is a condition. Naturally, I faced him calmly. No matter how intimate a relationship is, it cannot compare to mutual interests. No matter how good the feelings are, they still require benefits to be maintained. Arthur looked deep in thought. I then brought up a story from the past. I have heard tales of the old bond between my lord and concubine Lydia. The affection my lord holds for her is as solid as iron and stone. Naturally, I will help fulfill it. Lydia and Arthur were originally childhood sweethearts. Later, her family was condemned for a crime, and her entire family was exiled. She ended up sold into the government brothel. Arthur paid a heavy price to redeem her. Back then, Arthur was carrying out a secret mission, threatening the interests of noble families, and was assassinated. Lydia took a knife for him. Childhood sweethearts, compounded by the grace of saving his life. Even though she couldn't become the primary wife, her status in the Liu family remained as steady as a rock. Arthur valuing loyalty was a double-edged sword for me. On the bright side, a man who values sentiment is always better than a cold-hearted, ungrateful one. The air grew somewhat heavy, and the smile on his face gradually faded. "Madam seems to know quite a lot," he remarked. "Having entered the Liu family, I naturally must know the roots." I picked up a fan and waved it gently. After a long silence, he finally stood up. "Madam can rest assured. You are the wife of Arthur. Lydia will never overstep you." I smiled. "There is no need for my lord to remind me. The one my lord should be reminding is concubine Lydia. That would be the proper thing to do." He shot me a glance. I smiled faintly. My lord paid a great deal for Lydia's future. Therefore, my lord should be the one to tell concubine Lydia that if she wants to live well, she must clearly see reality. Standing against the lady of the house will never lead to a good end. Workplace rule number 2. When facing difficulties from superiors, unless it touches your core interests, always prioritize non-confrontational communication. Arthur looked at me. "Madam makes a very good point." His jaw muscle seemed to twitch slightly. "Harry's health has not yet recovered. Tonight, I will rest at Lydia's quarters." His gaze swept over me, seemingly casual. My voice remained natural, my smile unchanged. "My lord has the heart of a loving father." Arthur said no more, stood up, and left. The door closed. Chloe was worried. "My lady, by doing this, aren't you pushing the lord away?" I leaned back on the chaise lounge. "Silly girl. Fighting for fame and wealth, soaring high like an eagle. That is the instinct carved deep into a man's bones. The women in the inner courtyard, and love itself, are to men nothing more than pastimes during their leisure hours. Only women who cannot think clearly become obsessed with a man's favor. But what if you don't have his favor? Having power is enough." I pointed to the box on the desk. "This is the true foundation for a woman to stand firm. Favor flows away like water. Authority is the only anchor that secures the sea." Arthur married me to acquire the honorable reputation of the Qiao family, and because I was supposed to be easy to control. He could protect his little childhood sweetheart and his son, while simultaneously leaning on the Qiao family for mutual support in politics. He calculated his moves very shrewdly. Chloe still frowned. "What if the lord truly never comes? Then we shall see who can outlast who." Arthur stayed busy in his study until late at night, but eventually, he still came to my room. I told Chloe to open the door and let him in, looking at him with a half-smile. "My lord, the young master hasn't fully recovered yet. Aren't you going over there to keep him company?" Under the candlelight, I couldn't see Arthur's face clearly, only noting that his eyes were deeply dark. "Harry already has Lydia to take care of him." His voice carried a hint of displeasure. "What happened last night was my fault. I have come to apologize to you." And his so-called apology was coming to sleep with me. "Forgive me, but my body is unwell. I am afraid I cannot serve the lord tonight." The lord should go over to Lydia's place. He wanted to sleep with me, and I was just supposed to let him. If so, I would lose entirely too much face. Arthur's motion to unbutton his robe paused. The look he gave me carried surprise, as well as a surging anger. But his mind was deep and calculating. Even though he was angry at my failure to appreciate his favor, he didn't explode. He only gave me one long, deep look. "Very well. Then madam should rest well. I will go to Lydia's room." The sound of the door closing carried a suppressed fury. Not long after, Lydia's joyful voice echoed from the room across the courtyard. "My lord, why have you come again? What if the madam gets angry?" A soft voice floated through the night air. "You underestimate the madam too much. The madam is not a petty person," came the reply. "Brilliant. It's the middle of the night, who are they putting on this show for?" The next day, looking at the return visit dowry gifts prepared by the steward, 10 times more generous than my sister Celia's portion years ago, I nodded in satisfaction. The return on investment for the early stage had met the standard. The windows of the west courtyard were shut tight, The two who worked the night shift were probably still catching up on their sleep. When I arrived at the main chamber for morning greetings, the look in Dowager Chu's eyes had shifted from yesterday's guilt to the resentment of iron failing to become steel. She slowly sipped her tea, her words hiding needles. A woman should be rooted in docility. Being too rigid makes one prone to breaking, she remarked. I respectfully lowered my eyes. Mother teaches correctly. However, a man establishing himself in the world should also shoulder his responsibilities. Later, when the Lord arrives, I hope Mother will remind him as well. Dowager Chu's face darkened. Right at that moment, Arthur led Lydia in, taking their time and arriving late. His gaze seemed to inadvertently sweep past me before he bowed to the Dowager. The anger Dowager Chu had been suppressing instantly poured out onto Lydia. Concubine Lydia certainly puts on grand airs, waking up even later than the lady of the house, she snapped. Lydia's eyes instantly reddened, her voice soft and weak. I was taking care of Harry last night and barely slept. As she spoke, she gently leaned toward Arthur, a classic green tea speech, feigning weakness to implicitly flaunt her merits and claim credit. Dowager Chu sneered. The child has a wet nurse and maids to look after him. Why would it tire you out? She scolded while glancing at me. Her intention was far too obvious. Look, I am asserting authority on your behalf. When you return to your maiden home, do not say the Liu family mistreats you. I lowered my eyes to my tea, saying nothing. It was merely a minor workplace drama. The leadership publicly reprimanding an employee with connections was nothing more than an act for the newcomer to see. Arthur remained silent from beginning to end, his fingertips merely tapping lightly on the armrest of his chair. Once Dowager Chu finished scolding, he stood up. It is getting late, I must depart. Out in the corridor his footsteps slowed, walking parallel with me. Did Madam sleep well last night? His voice was calm. I smiled. Thanks to my lord's blessing. No one disturbed me. I slept soundly until dawn. He glanced at me, a flicker of dark shade crossing the depths of his eyes. As the carriage drove toward the Chiao Manor, I lifted the curtain and watched the Liu Manor's plaque slowly recede. The morning meeting's skirmish had concluded. Now it was time to show the old company just how vastly superior the benefits were after jumping ship. The Liu family's return gifts piled up, filling half the main hall. Master Chiao and Madame Chiao were beaming with joy. The look in their eyes clearly spelled out a valuable daughter brings a valuable son-in-law. But my brother-in-law, Edward, sat awkwardly on the cold chair. A poor scholar who had to rely on his wife's family for support. How could he possibly compare to Arthur, the emperor's favored minister? Master Kiao led his son and sons-in-law into the study. Madame Kiao, following tradition, asked 3 immediate questions. How does your husband treat you? Does the concubine behave? Is your mother-in-law kind? I answered impeccably, leaving no room for fault. My husband respects me. Despite an initial show of dominance, he handed over the household management rights. The concubine is fairly sensible, although she made a scene on the wedding night with her green tea act. Nothing else has happened. My mother-in-law values rules, so at least on the surface, things are acceptable. Madame Chiao nodded in satisfaction, then turned and immediately directed her fire at my sister, Celia. How could I have been so foolish back then? To let you choose that Edward, she scolded. Aside from the title of a scholar, what does he have? No property, no ability to shoulder responsibility. Celia's face turned pale. Only half a year had passed, and the light in her eyes had faded by more than half. She clenched her handkerchief tightly. My husband treats me very well. Madame Kiao sneered. How much are sweet words worth? If he truly treated you well, why would he let his mother torment you day after day? His only excuse is always, my mother didn't have it easy raising me. His mother did not have it easy, but does that make you her debtor? I almost applauded my mother. Ancient people inherently understood that the root of mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts is masculine incompetence. Celia lost face but remained stubborn. Do not despise a young man for being poor, she argued softly. Madame Kiao angrily slammed the table. Your dowry has already been 70% consumed by his family. By the time he actually makes a name for himself, you will be old and your beauty faded. He will take in beautiful concubines and favor newcomers. Those vows of on life, one world, one person, are fit only to feed the dogs, and even dogs wouldn't want them. Celia bit her lip, saying nothing. I intended to say a few words, but swallowed them back down. The path for women in this era was too narrow. Narrow to the point that even a sliver of false affection could be treated as a guiding light. If I were not a transmigrator, perhaps I too would hug that bowl of love makes you full even when drinking water. brimming with poison, drinking it until it shattered me from the inside out. Footsteps echoed outside the door. Master Qiao's laughter gradually approached. Madame Qiao immediately withdrew her anger, transforming back into the dignified lady of the house. I lowered my eyes and helped Celia adjust her slightly disabled lapels. Look at this. In this world, a woman must time her defensive armor perfectly, even when she is suffering grievances. After the 3-day bridal return visit, Arthur's brief wedding leave officially came to an end. Serving as a minister close to the emperor sounded glamorous, but in reality, it meant having no days off all year round. The moment he returned to the manor, he headed straight into his study. That place didn't just have iron guards at the door, but also servants keeping watch day and night. I stood behind the folding screen, secretly peeking out at the outer courtyard, and began calculating on my mental abacus. 2 attendants, 1 carriage driver, 2 page boys, 8 guards. For a 4th-rank civil official to afford this mansion in the capital, employ over 20 people, and own rural estates and shops. The so-called humble origins of the Liu family were completely in a different league compared to the poor humble origins of my own family. That's fine. The husband's family had wealth and power, the bed where I would lie flat and enjoy my blessings as the lady the house would be a bit softer too. That evening, as Chloe helped me remove my hairpins, she asked softly, "Shall we leave the door unlatched for the Lord tonight?" I looked in the mirror, at my still relatively fresh and pretty face, and remained silent for 3 breaths. I understood the principle perfectly. That cucumber had already been used by the green tea. I felt a bit disgusted in my heart. But the reality was even clearer. Shutting the door on the leadership for 2 consecutive nights. Tomorrow I might directly receive the insubordination reprimand package. Let me close my eyes and consider this as submitting a certificate of loyalty to the boss. Dirty or not dirty, workplace rule number 3, in the face of core interests. Personal germophobia counts as a workplace accident. But the boss didn't come. Instead, the west courtyard was lively. A soft, gentle voice drifted through the window on the night breeze, accompanied by the scattered clinking of porcelain. I stared at the 100 suns, embroidery on the bed canopy, so angry I laughed. Arthur played this cold treatment beautifully. No scolding, no punishing. He just used practical action to tell me, "You are not yet qualified to sit at the negotiation table." Frustrating. Yes. But what was more frustrating was that this result was brought upon myself by my own words last night. Lifting a rock to drop it on my own foot. Even if it hurts, I must endure it. Rolling over, I forced myself to find comfort. Also good. Tomorrow morning I don't need to wake up early to serve him before court. I can sleep an extra half hour. Half an hour later, just as dawn broke, the main courtyard stirred. Chloe frantically lifted the bed curtains. "My lady, wake up. The dowager has already finished dressing." I stared at the bedpost, screaming internally. What anti-human rule was this? The boss's mother was even harder to deal with than the boss himself. Dowager Chu sat upright in the main hall. The slight politeness from yesterday was completely gone. "Madame Qiao." She lightly tapped the lid of her teacup, her voice cold. "Having become someone's wife, paying respects morning and evening is fundamental. But look at you. Your husband attends morning court, and you do not serve him. You don't even arrange his breakfast. Do you put the rules of the Liu family in your eyes at all?" I stood below her with my head bowed, rolling my eyes internally. "Your son slept in the concubine's room last night, yet today you turn around and blame me for not serving him." This set of double standards was indeed the skill of a veteran management tier. On the surface, I remained as submissive as a chicken. Mother is right to teach me. Tomorrow, your daughter-in-law will certainly rise early. Dowager Chu snorted coldly, her gaze sweeping toward the east courtyard with deep implications. Men are prone to moments of folly. But if the lady of the house cannot even manage her own courtyard, when word spreads, you will be the one people laugh at. Understood. The implicit message from the boss's family, my son messing around is his business, but if you cannot control the situation, that is your incompetence. Stepping out of the main courtyard, my legs trembled. First, from hunger, second, from Dowager Chu establishing the rules by making me stand until I was sore. Chloe supported me, her eyes reddening again. I patted her shoulder, looking up at the sun that had reached mid-sky. Today's KPI checklist: digest the cold violence handed down by the boss, deal with the workplace pressure from the boss's family, and continue monitoring the dramatic moves of my green tea colleague. The path to lying flat is arduous and long, but that's okay. As long as the salary is paid in full, I can work this job until the earth grows old and the sky goes yellow. Returning to the east courtyard, I pinched a piece of pastry left by the maids to pad my stomach. Thinking about Dowager Chu's suppression made me angrier by the second. A mother-in-law establishing rules for a daughter-in-law is perfectly justified. Fine. Then a primary wife making a concubine work is also ancestral household law. I slammed the pastry down. Go. Invite concubine Lydia over. Tell her my legs are sore. Lydia arrived quite quickly, dressed in a pale silk skirt, looking like a weak willow in the wind. I pointed to my legs. I will trouble concubine Lydia. The moment her fingertips touched me, I hissed. Haven't you eaten? Use more force. For the entire afternoon it was massaging shoulders, pounding legs, pouring tea and serving water. The pressure I endured from the boss's family, I immediately pivoted and distributed entirely to my nepotism, higher subordinate, very logical. Estimating that Arthur was about to return to the manor, I was just about to let Lydia take a break, when her body suddenly went limp. With a thud, she fainted dead away right at my feet. What a coincidence. The tip of Arthur's shoe crossed the threshold at exactly that moment. His gaze swept over the pitiful Lydia lying on the floor, then shifted to me. The ice in the depths of his eyes condensed into tangible killing intent. Madame Kiao. Those two words seemed ground out through his teeth. My head buzzed. My hands moved faster than my brain. I grabbed the half-cup of hot tea on the table and threw it straight at her. Don't worry, my lord. Concubine Lydia is only faking a faint. The tea water accurately rushed straight into Lydia's nostrils. She choked and coughed violently, gasping continuously. Unable to fake it anymore, her tears fell like rain. It has nothing to do with madam. Your concubine was just a little dizzy, she whimpered. Arthur helped her up, his gaze pinned tightly to my face. Does madam not have maids in her room? Must you torment her? His voice was calm, but every word felt like a knife. If the lady of the house cannot even use her own people handily, it would be better to sell them all and replace them with a batch that works. I immediately adopted a tone of grievance. My lord wrongs me. This morning, the moment I woke up, I went to mother to learn the rules. I stood for 3 full hours. When I returned to my room, my shoulders and my back was sore. Only then did I ask concubine Lydia for a hand. Who knew? I raised my eyes, full of implication. Mother taught me that I must uphold the duties of a woman. I thought that a primary wife having a concubine serve her was also within her duties. Or is it that the rules of the Liu family only target the primary wife? The atmosphere instantly froze. Arthur narrowed his eyes. That look was like dissecting a criminal case. Sharp, cold, and probing. He understood. I deliberately tormented Lydia to rebel against Dowager Chu's control over me, while simultaneously reminding him. The premise of our partnership is a mutual pact. If your mother is the one to tear up the non-aggression treaty first, then when I exercise the authority of the primary wife, don't you dare complain. A long moment later, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, so faint it was almost invisible. Madam is indeed sharp-tongued. He personally supported Lydia to stand up, but didn't spare her another glance. He only said to me, since that is the case, tomorrow I will ask mother to excuse you from your morning and evening greetings. He glanced at the residual tea stain on the floor, his tone devoid of emotion. It is just that Lydia has a weak constitution. In the future, there is no need to trouble her with these rough chores. With that, he turned and left. Lydia hurriedly followed. My lord, please speak to mother on my behalf. Tell her my constitution is also very weak. Arthur did not turn his head, walking directly toward the main courtyard. Chloe asked softly, my lady, is the lord angry or not angry? I picked up a cold pastry and took a bite. Was angry, but his anger subsided. It's just that a new wave of anger is coming. I didn't exactly win this round, but at least I made the boss understand clearly. Although I, the newly arrived project manager, am at a disadvantage, I am not a soft persimmon that anyone can step on. Workplace survival rule number 4, you can lack cards in your hand, but you must absolutely possess the ability to flip the table. Dinner was served in Dowager Chu's main chamber. Obviously, the Dowager had been tipped off by Arthur. Though she no longer forced me to stand for rules, her face was covered in a layer of cold frost. The moment we sat down, she spoke with passive-aggressive sarcasm. Modern brides are truly something. Their bodies are more fragile than paper, you can't even touch them. I scooped a spoonful of soup, raised my head, and spoke gently to Arthur. It is strange, to tell the truth. In my maiden home, my health was always robust. Why is it that as soon as I entered the Liu family, just serving mother for half a day today, I felt dizzy, my vision blurred, cold sweat soaked my clothes, and I almost fainted. I gently placed the spoon on the edge of the bowl, frowning in feigned confusion. Could it be that the feng shui of this house harbors something disadvantageous? Dowager Chu angrily slammed her chopsticks down, her fingertip almost pointing straight at my nose. You truly have a sharp mouth. I only had you practice the rules for a brief moment, and you start fabricating stories to cause trouble. If you do not want to serve this old woman, just say so directly. I gripped my handkerchief and lightly wiped the corner of my eye, my voice as soft as water. Mother wrongs your daughter-in-law. Since childhood, I was raised with strict family precepts. How could I dare disrespect filial piety? It is just that. I looked up at Arthur, tears threatening to fall but held back. This body does not know its place. Even I am terrified. Dowager Chu was so angry her whole body trembled. Just as she was about to explode, Arthur raised his hand to stop her. He slowly put down his chopsticks, his gaze circling my face twice. Unexpectedly, instead of anger, he smiled. Madam makes a good point. His voice was calm and rippleless. It seems the feng shui of the main chamber truly clashes with her. In the future, unless it is a matter of importance, there is no need to come over here anymore. Dowager Chu's face abruptly changed. Arthur, the rites of filial piety, how can you… Mother. Arthur interrupted her, his tone gentle but heavy as a mountain. Madame Chiao is already unwell. Forcing her would contradict the true essence of benevolence and filial piety. The morning and evening greetings are temporarily suspended. I lowered my eyes, looking at the layer of fat floating on the soup, and gently stirred it. Excellent. The boss had finally seen reality clearly. Rather than letting two women perform domestic warfare dramas right in front of his eyes every day, it was better to draw clear battle lines and let each mind their own business. Dowager Chu's chest heaved violently, but she ultimately said not a word more. The meal was eaten in dead silence. When the dinner concluded, as Arthur walked past me, his footsteps paused slightly. Madam, his voice was so low only I could hear it. This matter regarding feng shui, let there not be a next time. I curtsied in greeting, raising my eyes to meet his bottomless dark pupils, and smiled. I will keep that in mind. Workplace experience number 5. Sometimes, the best way to resolve the trouble brought by the boss's family is to make the boss realize that this trouble will also delay his own official business. No matter how brilliant the boss is, he cannot endure having to handle mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship issues, the equivalent of pointless overtime, every single day. 3 months after we married, Arthur had not set foot in my room for even half a step. Aside from this, outwardly everything remained comprehensive. The necessary dignity was not lacking in the slightest, and my allowance only increased, never decreased. Dowager Chu treated me essentially like any other mother-in-law in the world, finding her daughter-in-law an eyesore no matter where she looked. I, in turn, treated her as the family member of a superior officer. Disliked but undeniably needing to be respected. The kind of person who can't help you get promoted, but can destroy your escape route, is the exact type of person you absolutely cannot afford to offend. Even though Arthur had excused me from the morning and evening greetings, I didn't dare truly treat it as an imperial exemption sword. Every day at noon, I would certainly go to the main courtyard to inquire after her health, either asking for her guidance on trill household matters or chatting about folk marketplace gossip. It perfectly fulfilled the etiquette while making her feel needed. Occasionally, when she wanted to find an excuse to stir up trouble, I would immediately take her out to the streets to shop for rouge, perfumes, silks, and jewelry. My eye had to be accurate, and the flattery had to be perfectly watertight. Mother possesses such an elegant aura. This intertwining floral silk suits you best, I would praise. Outsiders looking in would only praise the Lord for being filial and capable. If we were to dress shabbily, it would instead make people suspect the Liu family is in decline. I reasoned. Dowager Chu had been frugal for half her life, and at first, her heart ached over the spending. But as months passed, she gradually grew accustomed to the idea that clothes make the person. The resentment between her brows dissipated significantly. She even sighed and said, "A clever person like you, why don't you know how to be a bit softer?" Men, in the end, still prefer the gentle and understanding type. I smiled and replied, "Yes, mother," but the moment I turned my back I continued doing things my way. Managing a household relies on competence, not bedroom charms. The performance of a project manager has never been graded by sleeping with the boss. Meanwhile, Lydia refused to stay quiet. Relying on Arthur's exclusive favor, she often came before me to show off a string of pearl flowers rewarded by the Lord the day before, claiming it was to honor her status. At first, I just treated it like a mosquito buzzing in my ear. But seeing her push her luck further and further, I coldly reminded her of the rules. According to the laws of our dynasty, the personal assets of concubines are all uniformly managed by the primary wife. Since you have received such fine items, you might as well hand them over to the storehouse. Only then did she restrain herself slightly, but she soon hatched a new scheme. She instigated Arthur to ask for items from my dowry: folding screens, inkstones, rare manuscripts, each piece exquisitely crafted. Her excuse was the same timeless tune: your concubine has little fortune. Upon seeing Madam's fine things, I simply cannot tear my eyes away, she pleaded. Unexpectedly, Arthur also opened his mouth to speak on her behalf. You are the lady of the house, generously yielding a few items to her. What harm is there? I wasn't angry. On the contrary, I smiled brightly at him. Oh, the hot spring estate bestowed upon you by His Majesty. I have wanted it for a long time. Why doesn't my lord transfer the deed to my name? Seeing his face darken, I slowly continued. My lord is the head of the household, generously yielding it to your wife. What harm is there? Before Arthur could even speak, Lydia hastily cried out, that is an imperial gift. How can Madam forcefully demand it? My gaze turned ice cold. I am merely learning from you. Since you know it is a forceful demand, you should put away that face with its hand held out begging. My gaze sliced across her face like a knife. My things. Whether I reward them or destroy them, I make my own decisions. You are merely a concubine, you should remember your place. Do not use the leniency of the lady of the house as capital for your own reckless indulgence. Then, I turned to Arthur, every word crystal clear. My lord reads the sages, surely you know the saying, a gentleman does not snatch what others cherish. In this world, no one has ever possessed the qualification to lecture someone else on being generous. Lydia let out a sob and buried herself in Arthur's chest, her tears falling like pearls. It is your concubine who is useless, angering Madam. I sneered and cut her off. If you act this well, why don't we send you to a theatrical troupe so you can sing to your heart's content? Taking ignorance as dignity, using favor as a bargaining chip, and treating the primary wife's forbearance as weakness. Are you bored of being a concubine and now plotting to usurp my position as the lady of the house? I looked straight at Arthur, my words resolute. If my lord finds me to be an eyesore, you might as well write a letter of divorce. We can part peacefully, each going our separate ways. Each of us can find our own peace. A person like Lydia was no different from a festering ulcer clinging to the bone. If you tolerate her 3 inches today, tomorrow she will dare scheme for 7 inches of your vital points. While her wings are not yet fully grown, I must use thunderous methods to sever her delusions. As for Arthur, a high official walking before the emperor, could he truly be this foolish? He was merely borrowing her knife to test my depths. He wanted to see where my limits were as a business partner, and just how sharp my edge could be. In tonight's game of chess, I made it completely clear to him. A daughter of the Chiao family can take a step back, but not without boundaries. I can cooperate, but I will absolutely never bow my head. Workplace survival rule. You can lower your head temporarily, but your spine cannot bend, because once it bends, it will never straighten up again. Arthur's eyes were as deep as an abyss. Before he could even open his mouth, Lydia lunged forward and collapsed to her knees, crying and speaking simultaneously. That knife strike I risked my life to take for you back then. Have you completely forgotten it all? Today, just because of a few of Madam's playthings, I have to suffer such humiliation. If I had known, I would have been better off dying in the government brothel all those years ago. Dowager Chu, hearing the news and rushing over, also frowned and sighed. Arthur, Lydia ultimately has grace over you. Oh, what a powerful phrase. The grace of saving a life, the ultimate weapon of moral kidnapping, never fails to work. I coldly looked at the mother and son, pretending to be so aggrieved I couldn't speak, but internally I was laughing. Valuing sentiment and righteousness is originally a beautiful tale, but once someone grasps it as your fatal weakness, it becomes your own self-binding trap. Concubine Lydia. My voice was crystal clear, tearing through the room filled with sobbing. Since you brought up the grace of saving a life, then let us make things perfectly clear. I slowly walked over to stand in front of her, looking down from above. The Lord fished you out of the government brothel. He gave you the official status of a concubine, provided you with fine food and silk clothing, and placed his eldest son at your knees to raise. This grace, has it been fully repaid yet? She looked up, stunned, a teardrop hanging on her eyelashes. If you still feel it has not been fully repaid. I turned around and looked toward Arthur, every word like a nail driven into wood. The grace of saving a life should be repaid with heavy gold, not by absorbing someone into the inner courtyard. Today she can use this grace to demand a few playthings, tomorrow she will be able to demand an official title. The day after tomorrow, will I have to offer up my very position as the lady of the house with both hands. The joints of Arthur's fingers clenched until they were stark white. My voice grew progressively sharper and colder. Bestowing grace and demanding repayment is no longer the act of a gentleman. Using grace to extort repayment is the behavior of a petty villain. All these years, the Lord has given her so much dignity. Is it still not enough? Must the entirety of the Liu family, top to bottom, be indebted to her? Agreeing to whatever she says, is that the only way to prove you haven't gotten her grace? Every sentence was a knife, yet it also struck the very knot that had choked Arthur's heart for years, a knot he had never dared to voice. He abruptly stood up, the cold gleam in his eyes instantly sharpening. Lydia's entire body trembled. From today onwards, you are grounded in the West Courtyard for 3 months. Harry will temporarily move to the East Courtyard to be cared for by the wet nurse. His voice was deep and freezing, utterly devoid of any warmth. If you ever dare to use this grace to threaten me and cause trouble again. He paused, enunciating every single word. The Liu family does not tolerate those who shake the foundation and forget their roots. Lydia went completely limp, collapsing onto the floor. Her wailing abruptly ceased, leaving behind only a deathly silence. Dowager Chu wanted to speak but stopped herself, ultimately turning her face away. That night, Arthur stepped into my room. Under the candlelight, he sat quietly on the edge of the bed. After a long time, he finally said, "The words you spoke today, every single sentence held reason." I was removing my hairpins. Hearing this, I looked at him through the mirror. It is not that my lord does not understand. It is simply that you were bound by the 2 words grace and righteousness. His mouth twitched, his smile carrying a hint of bitterness. I can navigate the treacherous political arena, but the inner courtyard runs on emotions. It is conversely much harder to guard against. Therefore, I turned around, looking straight at him. When grace must be severed, it must be severed. Keeping finances completely separated is the cleanest way. He looked at me for a very long time, then suddenly reached out, brushing away a few stray strands of hair by my temple. "Madam. Yes. From now on, the Liu inner courtyard is handed over to you." I lowered my eyes and chuckled softly. The rule for corporate promotion. When the boss finally realizes that the existence of certain nepotism hires continuously drains the collective's resources and drags down overall progress, that is the exact moment you truly seize power. That night, the red candles were not trimmed, but several boundaries had quietly become crystal clear. Although I was not particularly keen on using my body to curry favor with superiors, transactions made in bed were indeed highly efficient. Arthur handed over several more of his private properties for me to manage. Very well. This man truly was a cunning rabbit with 3 burrows. No wonder quite a few people resort to serving others with their beauty. It is not only a shortcut, but it yields high returns with minimal effort. The leadership's compensation was generous, and the returns were fast. That tiny bit of physical discomfort was completely crushed out of existence by the authority bestowed by the boss. For several consecutive days resting in my room, Arthur successfully handed over more properties for me to oversee. The silk shop in the western part of the city, the rice shop at the southern gate, plus 2 courtyard estates collecting rent. Account books and keys piled up, filling a heavy trunk. The Lord's assets appear to be much thicker than they seem on the surface, I mused. I flipped through the land deeds, giving a half smile. Standing by the window, he turned his head upon hearing this. "Does Madam complain that it is too much?" How would I dare? I locked the trunk. I am merely sighing with emotion. Serving with beauty may be a shortcut, but having the managerial capability to run a household is the true long-term strategy. An extremely face of a smile flickered across his eyes. 3 days before the Mid-Autumn Festival, Arthur arrived, stepping through the shadows of the night. "Minister Zhao's birthday banquet. You must accompany me." I looked up from the pile of account books. "Is this the Minister Zhao who frequently takes special care of my husband?" He remained silent. Understood. It was precisely the superior who routinely cut into his seasonal bonuses, and constantly assigned him the most troublesome and difficult tasks. "My lord, rest assured." I closed the ledger. "Maintaining key relationships is also your wife's duty." Since this was an opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities, I naturally had to give it my all. In 3 days, utilizing my network, I thoroughly investigated 70% of Madame Zhao's background. She loved reading folk novels, particularly those satisfying stories with a suppressed beginning leading to an explosive comeback. As a second wife, her biggest taboo was being compared to the famously illustrious first wife. Although she was excellent at business, she was frequently mocked by the noble scholar faction as reeking of money. To handle a difficult client, I had my own methods. On the day of the birthday banquet, I brought 2 gifts to the Zhao Manor. One was a novel written by my own hand, titled So What If There Is No Love? It was bound in sheepskin, the pages sprinkled with gold. In the story, the female protagonist is a second wife who sees through the illusions of romance and focuses entirely on securing profits. That psychological journey secretly aligned with the hidden pains of countless women trapped in deep courtyards. The second gift was a pair of jadeite earrings, crystal clear in color, except the design was an old style from 15 years ago. Arthur frowned. I fear this item is outdated. I smiled faintly. What we need is exactly for Madame Zhao to recognize it. Old items are the easiest way to stir up old memories. In the floral hall of the Zhao Manor, surrounded by jewels and jade, Madame Zhao sat upright in the seat of honor. She accepted all the flattery from the crowd, but her smile never reached her eyes. It wasn't until she opened the gift registry and her finger brushed over the cover of the novel that she suddenly paused. So what if there is no love? Is this a new release? Madame truly has a sharp eye, I said softly. In my leisure time I also enjoy flipping through a few novels. I found this one to have quite a novel premise, and its writing style is clean and sharp. Thus, I immediately thought to recommend it to Madame. She read the opening lines, and a light suddenly sparked in the depths of her eyes. This author, on the contrary, stabbed straight into the heart of the matter. Who wrote this? The essence of modern short stories, deployed against ancient people like Madame Zhao, was absolutely a devastating blow from above. I lowered my eyes and said, a nameless wanderer in the martial world. That leaves even more room for one's imagination. Madame Zhao read for a while longer before reluctantly closing the book, studying me closely. Madame Lu truly put her heart into this. After that, I presented the pair of earrings. As expected, she froze. Picking them up to examine them closely, her eyes grew slightly misty. This design. I originally had an identical pair in my dowry. Last year I accidentally broke one. I gathered my sleeves and let out a soft sigh. So it turns out to be such destiny. I happened to see this item at the Junlong Pavilion, and only felt it looked familiar. It seems it is the will of heaven attempting to mend Madame's longing. The other ladies at the banquet chimed in continuously in agreement. Madame Zhao gripped the earring tightly, her gaze softening entirely. When the banquet reached its climax, a Madame Yang made a slip of the tongue, bringing up an old story about Minister Zhao's first wife, that incredibly talented older legitimate sister, whose fame echoed throughout the capital, had always remained a thorn in Madame Zhao's heart from beginning to end. I raised my cup and smiled. Madame Yang, what a coincidence. Both Madame Zhao and I are people who are not well versed in poetry and prose. Does a lack of poetic skill mean one does not deserve to live? Then, feigning sudden realization, I added, since you miss the late Madame Zhao so dearly, your poetic talent must be extraordinary. Why not compose a poem on the spot, so that we may broaden our horizons? Madame Yang's face instantly twisted in awkwardness, and the gloom between Madame Zhao's brows dissipated accordingly. Unwilling to back down, Madame Yang then sarcastically mocked Madame Zhao for reeking of money. I almost wanted to thank her for handing me such a perfect excuse. My husband often says, I stated, governing a household is like governing a nation, only with transparent accounts can it endure. My voice was not loud, but every word was clear. Madame Zhao is profoundly skilled in the ways of commerce, allowing goods to circulate smoothly, stabilizing the people's livelihoods, and bringing prosperity to the clan. With such world-managing talent, I cannot admire her fast enough. How could anyone possibly call it reeking of money? I thoroughly preserved the dignity of the Zhao family, while cleverly elevating the path of a merchant to the level of world-saving competence. I rode the momentum and said to Madame Zhao, I am ignorant, and my husband comes from a humble, impoverished background. I, too, wish to learn some business methods to supplement our household expenses. In the days to come, I hope Madame will not withhold her guidance. Madame Zhao gave me a deeply profound look, then raised her cup and drank it dry. In the carriage returning to the manor, Arthur rested with his eyes closed. A long time later, he suddenly said, as the banquet concluded, Minister Zhao asked me whether Madame Lu often visits their manor to chat. I smiled. How did my lord reply? His voice carried a very faint trace of a smile. I said, My wife's constitution is weak, so it is inconvenient for her to travel frequently. But if your madam does not mind, she is welcome to come to our humble abode to listen to music and enjoy tea. Brilliant. Retreating to advance, while implicitly stating that his wife was not someone easy to summon, I nodded. My lord's calculations are comprehensive. Maintaining boundaries and knowing one's self-worth makes one all the more valuable. Arthur suddenly leaned over, his fingertips lifting my chin. The carriage swayed slightly, his breath brushing past my forehead. Where did Madame learn these tactics? Meeting his deep, lake-like gaze, I curled my lips into a smile. If I dare to negotiate terms with my lord, naturally, I have something to rely on. For instance, navigating among the madams in the official manners, I possess quite a few methods. Treating the noblewomen of the capital like corporate clients. In this, I was a true professional. 3 days later, I sent an invitation to the Zhao Manor. Madame Zhou quickly responded, inviting me to enjoy a melody and drink tea. She clutched the novel tightly, loving it so much she refused to put it down. I finished reading it in one night. It truly hits right at the dark heart of the matter, she confessed. Using the story in the book, I cleverly consoled her. Living in this world as a woman is already not easy. Why must we be bound by the gazes of others? Everyone has their own way to live. Talented female scholars have the elegance of scholars, we have our own pragmatism. Finding joy for ourselves is what is truly best. Madame Zhou nodded continuously. Hearing you speak, my heart is suddenly enlightened. When we parted ways, she grasped my hand. Come visit often from now on. If Lord Lu ever faces difficulties at the government office, simply say the word. That night, Arthur returned to the manor. He brought news the Jiangnan grain transport case, which had been backlogged for half a year, had finally been stamped and approved in red ink by Minister Zhao. He pushed a land deed across the desk. A hot spring estate outside the city. His tone was as flat as usual. Didn't Madam often say it gets stifling in the manor? When you have free time, you can go there to relax your muscles and bones. I accepted the land deed, my eyelashes fluttering slightly. Is this a bonus awarded for a job well done? For once Arthur didn't refute my phrasing. Under the lamp, he stood silently for a long time before speaking in a low voice. The family of Vice Minister Huang of the Ministry of Works, Madam should find a way to establish a connection. I gripped the land deed tightly and replied with a smile, understood. The first phase of our partnership had yielded obvious results. In the Lu family, without needing to rely on bearing children, I had already planted my heels firmly. Using the pretext of gifting novels and asking for business advice, my interactions with Madame Zhao became increasingly intimate. As for the families of the civil officials wielding actual power in the capital, I could exchange at least a few words with almost all of them. Even if it couldn't be called deep friendship, our faces were at least familiar to one another. Arthur's connection with Minister Zhao gradually cleared, and our family's business latched onto a solid backer. The properties of the Lu family sprouted like spring trees, visibly flourishing. Naturally, I grew increasingly busy. By day, I audited ledgers, met with shopkeepers, and attended tea parties at various manors. By night, I had to manage the inner courtyard and cross-check the storehouses. Arthur lacked the pedantic air commonly seen in officials. Understanding that money was the crucial pivot, he not only refrained from hindering my business ventures but, seeing I was short-handed, even transferred a highly capable accountant from his own side to assist me. If Madam needs people, just speak up, he said, dispatching a manager named Manager Allen to me. His voice was flat. Only one condition: the accounts must be clear, and their hands must be clean. I smiled and agreed. A boss with humble origins was indeed practical. After her grounding period ended, Lydia used every trick in the book to win back Arthur's attention. Feigning illness, acting weak, she even wanted to frame me for treating her harshly. Unfortunately, she forgot that the authority of the inner courtyard now rested firmly in my hands. She feigned illness. I immediately tied up her personal maid and interrogated her right in the main hall. Within half a day, unable to withstand the whipping, someone confessed the truth. She pretended to be weak and complained of suffering, but it happened to be exactly when Arthur was swamped official duties and often slept at the government office. When he occasionally returned home, he coaxed her with a few words at first, but after it happened repeatedly, his tone turned icy. If you constantly suspect the lady of the house of framing you, you might as well move to the Buddhist shrine to recover your health, he snapped. Frightened out of her wits, Lydia never dared to utter half a bad word about me again. I watched her make a scene until she had enough, and only then did I summon her before me. A man's love is like morning dew, I said, skimming the foam off my tea, my tone casual. Instead of exhausting your mind fighting for it, why not think about what you will rely on to stand firm decades from now? She knelt on the floor, her eyes blurry with tears. You know how to read and calculate, I said, pushing a stack of account books toward her. From today onwards, audit the cash flow of these shops for me. Do it well, and there will naturally be silver as a bonus. But if you cause trouble again... I raised my eyes, my gaze like a knife. The Tranquil Heart Nunnery may be crowded with nuns, but it certainly lacks no room for one more. When dealing with an underperforming subordinate who loves to stir up trouble, rather than firing them, it is better to assign them a saturated workload. Once they are busy, they naturally have no free time to cause chaos. I softened my voice again. You are merely afraid of losing favor and losing your backing. But as long as you know your place and do your work, the Liu family will never leave you lacking in food or clothing, and I will not deliberately make things difficult for you. I paused for a moment. Wait until I give birth to a legitimate son, and I will naturally advise the Lord to visit your room more often. She abruptly raised her head. Raising someone else's child always leaves a layer of distance. I lowered my voice, as if sincerely confiding in her. One's own biological flesh and blood is always more reliable. Don't you also wish to have more flesh and blood of your own? Lydia's eyes wavered intensely. Finally, she bowed deeply to the floor. Your concubine understands. That night, Arthur returned home quite early. Hearing my arrangements for Lydia, he raised an eyebrow. You certainly know how to utilize personnel. Even waste materials can be recycled, let alone a living person who can read and calculate. I helped him take off his official robes. It is altogether better than letting her stay idle and cause trouble. He turned around and looked at me, his eyes profound. Madam, what exactly are you scheming for? I smiled. I am scheming for peace, scheming for the long term. Hanging up his official robes, I continued, my lord is a smart man. You must understand that only with a stable inner courtyard can you have no worries behind you. If Lydia can peacefully do her work, it is a good thing for you, for me, and for the Liu family. He fell silent for a long time. Suddenly, he reached out and pulled me close, his breath brushing against my ear, his voice low and hoarse. What about you? What is the long-term goal that you want? I leaned against his shoulder, looking out the window at the moon that was gradually turning full. What I want is that even if one day love fades and mutual interests dissolve, I, Luna Qiao, can still stand straight in this manner and speak my mind. His arm tightened around me. You will have it. After a very long time, he said, you will have a legitimate son. You will have authority, you will have honor. I closed my eyes. Romance is like smoke and clouds, interests are like the changing tides. Only power and money held firmly in one's hands, along with a child carrying one's own bloodline, are the most solid backing in this deep courtyard. At the end of the month during the account reconciliation, the ledger Lydia submitted was unexpectedly neat and clear. I rewarded her with 10 taels of silver. Not bad. She gripped the silver tightly, her lips trembling, and suddenly knelt down. Madam, your concubine was foolish in the past. There is no need to bring up the past. I helped her stand up. From now on, just do your job well, and I will not mistreat you. She nodded vigorously, her eyes completely red. After stepping out of the accounting room, Chloe asked softly, my lady, do you truly believe she has changed? I looked at the ginkgo tree in the courtyard, its leaves gradually turning yellow. Whether I believe it or not is irrelevant. A leaf fell into the palm of my hand. What is relevant is that she knows working for me means she gets meat to eat. Human nature leans toward profit, it has always been this way. Autumn sunlight pierced through the gaps in the leaves, casting mottled streaks of light. This chess game was finally unfolding into the exact shape I desired. Heaven had not treated me poorly. In the winter of my second year after marrying into the Liu family, I smoothly gave birth to a legitimate son. On the day of the third day bathing ceremony, my mother brought my sister Celia and my sister-in-law to the manor to visit. Dowager Chu personally came out to receive them. She was exceptionally accommodating and enthusiastic, putting on an impressive display of a benevolent mother-in-law and a filial daughter-in-law. Lydia was attending to my medicine by the bed. Seeing guests arrive, she hurriedly bowed her head and withdrew. My mother shot her a sideways glance. Waiting until only our own family remained in the room, she frowned and scolded lightly. You truly are too broad-minded, actually letting a concubine get so close to serve you. Leaning on a soft pillow, I smiled faintly. It is fine. I have already made it clear to her. Once I gave birth safely, I would stop her contraceptive medicine. My fingertips gently stroked the soft baby hair of the child in my arms. If my child suffers even half a misstep, there will immediately be several new faces added to the Lord's room. She is a sensible person, she knows exactly what to choose. Madame Qiao's face softened slightly. She nodded in praise. You truly know how to distinguish what is important. Then, turning to look at Celia, who was sitting with her head bowed beside the bed, her voice suddenly dropped. Look at your younger sister. She is young, yet she handles matters so clearly. She is nothing like you, marrying a poor scholar, only to have him grip you tightly while burning through your entire dowry. Maids climbing into his bed, and now even a concubine dares to make you suffer grievances. Celia had been married to Edward for 4 years, holding 2 children in 3 years, and her body was worn down, as fragile as paper. Her dowry had long been drained dry by the Zhao family. Her former personal maid had become the newly favored concubine, ironically possessing more dignity than her, the primary wife. The more Madame Qiao spoke, the angrier she got. Your father, for all his wealth, is a 4th-rank official, and you? You let a fallen household ride on your head, forcing me and your sister-in-law to go to the Zhao family time and again to back you up. Mother, I gently cut in. Please do not place all the blame on Celia. She has a kind nature. How could she know whether the person sharing her pillow is a man or a ghost? The poorer the family, the better they are at tormenting people. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Celia's hands clenched tightly inside her sleeves, her knuckles bone-white. I changed my tone and sighed. Mother, do not only look at my glory right now. The bitterness inside is something only I know. My voice gradually lowered, sounding almost choked with emotion. Lydia caused no small amount of trouble in the past. My mother-in-law forced rules upon me, punishing me to stand until I almost fainted. My husband also gave me the cold shoulder for 3 full months. To recount each and every matter, it truly has not been easy. Right on cue, the corners of my eyes reddened. Madame Qiao was stunned, and my sister-in-law continuously voiced words of comfort. Celia slowly raised her eyes. The layer of jealous ice in the depths of her gaze quietly melted into a complex hue. There was surprise, there was schadenfreude, and even a hint of sympathy from someone in the same boat. I lowered my eyes. Workplace survival rule. Appropriately revealing weaknesses is precisely the easiest way to neutralize potential hostility, because everyone is happy to see that the person shining brightly on the surface also has mud clinging to their back. Only then does it feel fair. Only then do they feel at ease. Outside the window, the snow fell silently. The baby in my arms suddenly babbled, his tiny fist waving gently. I lowered my head and pressed a light kiss to his forehead. When I looked up, I had recovered my gentle and elegant smile. Fortunately, all of that has passed now. The days ahead will only get better and better. These words were spoken for them to hear, but also for myself. The baby's full-month banquet. The guests were packed, and congratulatory gifts filled 3 storehouses. Madame Qiao looked across the great hall, filled with noble guests in purple robes and red hats. 3 parts emotional, 7 parts reassured. Just now, someone wanted to gift a beautiful concubine to your husband, and he flatly refused. Truly decisive, she murmured, lowering her voice. Back when you chose him, I was still worried. Now it seems he understands propriety and knows the rules far better than that Edward. I smiled in response, but my mind remained crystal clear. Rules have always been set for those willing to keep them. If you want a person in power to follow the rules, you must make him understand the cost of breaking them. Late at night, the guests dispersed. Arthur returned, carrying the scent of alcohol. I helped him out of his robes and casually recounted a few rumors I had heard at the banquet. The secrets of a certain vice minister's outer residence, the tangled marriage alliances of a certain minister. At first glance, it sounded like idle gossip, but it secretly concealed the political currents of the imperial court. The drunkenness in his eyes gradually faded. He listened intently, and finally sighed. If not for Madame's reminder, I would have nearly misjudged the situation. I took the hangover, relief soup brought by a maid and spoke softly. My lord worries over court affairs. Naturally, your wife must keep an eye on the gossip of the inner courtyards on your behalf. I paused for a moment, as if inadvertently. Aye, that's right. That generous gift from the Minister of Rights today. You refused it beautifully. Under the candlelight, he suddenly looked up, staring intently at me. Yet outsiders are all laughing, saying I am afraid of my wife. I gently stirred the soup with a spoon, the corners of my lips carrying a soft, faint smile. Only when the inner courtyard is stable can one's career path be smooth. My lord is a smart man. You naturally understand that beauty is easy to obtain, but it acts as a blade that scrapes the bone. He was silent for a moment. Suddenly, his hand reached through the swirling steam, lifting my face. His fingertips were slightly cold, but his gaze was scorching. Luna Qiao. It was the first time he had called my maiden name. His voice lowered. Amidst this bustling hall and the lively congratulations, "Are you even halfway joyous for my sake?" I met his gaze and brought the bowl of soup to his lips, my smile gentle as ever. "My lord, true heart is like a drop of dew. It looks crystal clear, but the moment the sunlight hits it, it evaporates." Through the hazy steam of the soup, I looked straight into the depths of his lake, like eyes. When a man is awake, he grips the sword to conquer and slay. When drunk, he lies on the lap of a beauty. Naturally, it is exhilarating. But throughout history, beauty and supreme authority have rarely coexisted perfectly. Pausing, I said softly, "Does my lord want the high path to the clouds, or a soft blade that mesmerizes even as it cuts you?" He looked at me quietly and said, "Madam, why look left and right and speak of other things? What I am clearly asking for is the true heart of my wife." "A true heart," I chuckled softly. "That is the cheapest betrothal gift in the world. What I want is authority that can be held firmly in my hands, respect, and a lifetime of peace." He froze. His eyes darkened, and the fingers holding my chin slowly let go. Leaning against my hand, he drank the entire bowl of soup and let out a soft laugh. "Madame is always so wide awake." The smile didn't reach the bottom of his eyes. All that remained was a profound abyss, like loneliness. He turned and walked toward the bed. Under the candlelight, his back cast a long shadow, lonely yet ramrod straight. Later on, I often thought that his moment of gloom was perhaps not entirely because of me. Rather, it was the sudden realization that the most solid alliances in this world largely begin from cold, awake calculations, not from foolish obsessive infatuation. As for me, I would much rather choose the clear-eyed benefits I can hold securely in my hands, rather than some illusory true heart, fragile and easily shattered. Because in the depths of this official inner courtyard, the former can guarantee you a lifetime of peace and stability, while the latter is highly likely to damn you to eternal ruin. True empowerment begins when you stop waiting for a savior and become your own strategist. In a world that expects women to trade their submission for fragile affection, the greatest act of rebellion is radical pragmatism. Love and favor are like morning dew, beautiful but fleeting. However, tangible capabilities, clear boundaries, and financial independence are the anchors that withstand any storm. Never compromise your core interests for temporary peace, and never bend your spine to accommodate someone else's ego. Ultimately, your worth is not defined by who chooses you, but by the undeniable empire you build with your own hands. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.